Brother Baub, croeso i'r webinar Dwrishka Ola. Aisha Dwi, ymchwilio dwi ar ei prosiect Dwrishka yn yr ysgol Godrau Naturiol ym Prifysgol Bangor, ac dwi'n mynd I gadeirio sesiwn hwn. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for waiting and thanks for joining us today on the last webinar in the Dwrishka Sustainability webinar series. My name is Aisha and I am a researcher on the Dwrishka project based at the School of Natural Sciences at Bangor University, and I'm going to chair this session. So it's good to see some familiar faces back. Welcome back and thanks for joining us again. And for those joining us for the first time, Dwrishka is an interdisciplinary cross-border Ireland-Wales research project funded by the Interreg Ireland Wales program. And the project is looking at the different ways to improve the energy performance and long-term sustainability of the water sectors in Ireland and Wales. And we're doing this through the assessment of current and emerging low carbon technologies like micro hydropower and rainwater heat recovery, smart networks, and also through economic, environmental, and climate change impact assessments. We're also looking into auditing, rating, and benchmarking of both water supply and water demand. So we're therefore looking into the whole, into the energy use of the whole water systems life cycle, from provisioning to use and disposal, to assess both, technologies and intervention measures that can help with improvements in the sector. So the project's main objective is the reduction of energy consumption and associated emissions in the sector, primarily through reduction in costs of water supply and treatment, and reduction in energy use and emissions for all water end users. So households, businesses, and other sectors like food and drink, hospitality, and leisure sectors, etc. So pretty much all water users. We're also developing policy and best practice guidance, as technology really can only be used to address challenges in the sector like inefficiency and climate change when we fully understand all the gaps and all the opportunities that are available. So the first 3 webinars in the series presented our work and progress with micro hydropower and wastewater or drain water recovery. Recordings of these are available in the cluster member area of our website. So just a bit of disclosure and housekeeping before we proceed. The session is being recorded and we will also be saving the chat log. The recording will be available in the cluster member area of the website in the next few days. And if you're not already a member of the cluster, you can request to join. I will put a link to that shortly in the chat section. And I would also like to ask everyone to please keep your microphones and cameras off to minimize any feedback or disruption. And please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat to submit comments and questions throughout the session. We are interested in learning more about your experiences with benchmarking water and energy use, and we would like to hear more about your journeys, your success stories and challenges and barriers you have come across with benchmarking, if you can share them. So we hope we will be able to have some time left at the end of the presentations for some Q&A and discussion. So feel free to turn on your camera then when asking a question or commenting if you'd like. So I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Next slide, please. And the next one, sorry. talk through all the slides. I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Dr. Anam Rafiq and Nathan Walker. They're both based at the School of Natural Sciences at Bangor University, and they'll be talking about our work on benchmarking and its importance with some examples from their work in the project. So Nathan has a background in environmental science and clean technologies, and he is currently finishing his PhD in performance analysis of water supply, use and treatment. And he has presented this research across the globe, including in Manila and Vancouver, and but is very excited to be talking about benchmarking today in a more carbon friendly medium. In his spare time, he plays a lot of snooker, and he is a gaming YouTuber, so check him out. And the other speaker today is Anam. Anam is an economist, and her work on the project is looking at the energy consumption in the residential sector and in the residential space and water heating sector. She is exploring the cost and savings of switching from systems using conventional heating fuel like gas and electricity, LPG and coal, to low carbon options like solar PV, biomass boilers and heat pumps. And in Anam's free time, she likes to read fantasy fiction, and is very willing to discuss the last 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, she says, and why she thinks they were such a disappointment. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anam now for her presentation on benchmarking. Oh, sorry, before we begin, we actually have a poll. Anam, do you want to go on with the poll first? Yeah, I'm just going to lunch, yeah, it's here. Would like to, learn a bit more about where everyone is from and their level of experience with benchmarking. And this is going to help Anam and Nathan with examples that are relevant to, people's experiences and background, really. All right, I'll give you a few more seconds. All right, we have 73% of people voting, and I'm going to end and share the poll. So most people are from academia, and we have a bit of people from everywhere else, and most people are from Ireland. So, well, thanks all for doing the poll, and I'm now going to mute myself and hand over to Anna. Thanks, Anna.
Right. Good morning, everybody. As Aisha just mentioned, my name is Anam Rafiq, and I am working as a postdoc on the Durishka project. For this webinar, I would like to discuss what exactly is benchmarking, what is its importance, and then I would also give a small example of how benchmarking can be performed. And then later on, we are going to be moving to Nathan, who is going to be discussing the case studies regarding benchmarking, so that you can have so that you can have an industry outlook of how benchmarking is conducted and what are the key elements of benchmarking. Right. So when we are talking about benchmarking, we are talking about comparing something. But essentially, benchmarking is all about getting the best value out of something. Um, let's talk about what are the goals of a business, right? There are a few things that businesses do in order to improve themselves. Businesses have goals such as they need to improve their profitability, they need to reduce their costs. They could be either production costs, they could be their raw material costs, it could be even their energy costs. They might want these businesses might be very environmentally um, have a very environmental awareness, due to which their main goal might be reducing some sort of emissions. But at the end, all the businesses, what they want to do is that they want to get better, or they want to perform better than what they were performing before. And to do that, to improve their performance, to improve their profitability, to increase their market share, they need to compare how their production is with their competitors. And that is where benchmarking comes into being. So what exactly is benchmarking? Benchmarking is the search for the best practice in the industry, so that we can judge what the superior performance is going to be. The best thing about benchmarking is that it can help you to compare your own business performance to your competitors' performance, and analyze what are the best practices that they are conducting, which you can also emulate into your own business and make it much more better. Then again, the important goal of benchmarking is obviously to improve a company's performance. Again, no matter if it's the industry, if it's a small SMEs, if it's a government organization, universities, academia, whatever it is, every person or every person's goal is to improve their performance, and that is and benchmarking can help you by comparing yourself with your competitors. However, benchmarking should not be taken as a quality assurance models, because quality assurance models just generally deal with what the quality of your output is going to be, and it does not look into all the other factors that affect your businesses or your firms. Due to this reason, where benchmarking basically looks at all the aspects of a business, benchmarking cannot be conducted in isolation. So you need to create such sort of goals which basically contribute to the company's overall objections. Now, one of the interesting things that come after benchmarking is that it helps you to implement new technologies. So once you have benchmarked yourself against best practices, you might realize that a certain company which is similar to yours is using a sort of a technology which you have not really applied to your own company. And once you do, hopefully it might lead to some sort of cost savings, higher quality of your products, increase in productivity, possibly more innovation, because you need to get better with your competitors, as well as leading to higher efficiency, especially when you remove all the processes and the procedures which are ineffective in your business. We also need to look at benchmarking from a managerial perspective as well, where all the managers, their one of their jobs is to improve the business, um, and so there is a need of a continuous and a systematic process to identify whatever best practices are there in the industry. In that way, it would contribute to the efficiency. Another interesting thing about benchmarking is that it should not also be compared to some sort of a competitive analysis, where you are just comparing what your competitors are doing and with whatever your business is performing, it is always important to basically change those best practices so that they can be implemented to your own company and to your own objectives and to your own goals properly. Some of the importance of benchmarking. The first thing is that it helps to reveal what are the successful business processes. So suppose that you have a competitor and you look at the competitor and see that the competitor is performing much more better than you are. Now you are basically unclear of what are the reasons of your competitor's better performance. You would observe your competitor and you would scrutinize their businesses in such a way that you are going to identify what were the contributing factors to their success, and then implement those contributing factors to your own business performance in order to improve yourself. Then another interesting thing about benchmarking is that it helps to facilitate knowledge. So basically, to benchmark again, you need to know the market, you need to know the industry, you need to know your competitors. So a lot of these small firms, they have either a whole department specified for benchmarking and research for that, or they have at least one or two dedicated members who are looking at their competitors. In that way, there is a continuous research and development going on in your business, which would definitely help to facilitate knowledge sharing, as well as in terms that there are certain newer policies that are being implemented to your industry. Benchmarking is going to make it easier because you are already uh, researching the industry. And then again, to gain competitive advantage, obviously, if you use your competitors processes and change them to your own likings, then obviously there is a possibility that you can gain some sort of an competitive edge. Now, with benchmarking, there are basically five different types of benchmarking. So we have internal benchmarking, external benchmarking, process benchmarking, strategic benchmarking, and the performance benchmarking. I mean, obviously, with their titles, it's easier to determine what exactly is in these kinds of benchmarking. So, first of all, is the internal benchmarking. Now, in internal benchmarking, you are looking within your company. So, let's take an example of Domino's. If Domino's is looking at, let's say, delivery between its franchises in Ireland and deliveries between its franchises in Wales, that would be their internal benchmarking, since it is a single company. Now, in that way, the internal benchmarking would be generally less time consuming, since again, it is your own company and you would always have all the information that is necessary to carry out benchmarking. Again, since it is being done internally within your company, once you have observed what the best practices are, those best practices are much more easier to implement, since your own employees would be able to actually observe what the best practices are. In that way, it would be easier to basically copy that, and thus improving innovation. um, Again, since it is basically internal benchmarking is basically a competition within your own company, so you can say that there would be a possibility of continuous improvement, where all the different departments are going to be looking to improve themselves in order to be the best within that firm. Then we have external benchmarking. Now, external benchmarking is you comparing your own business to another industry, or to another business within the industry. So let's say that we are comparing uh, Primark with Matalan or something. They both are different businesses, but however, they both belong to the same industry, and that would be external benchmarking. Now, one of the key things about external benchmarking is that it would help you to identify your competitors. Now, when you are looking at your competitors, there are a few things that you need to take into account, and that is the nature of the business, the size of the business, the number of the employees it has, how much profit it produces. Because again, when you are comparing, it's always better to compare apples with apples and oranges to oranges and not apples to oranges. So so that is external benchmarking. However, again, there are a few problems with external benchmarking. And again, these are not problems that are just associated with external benchmarking, but maybe benchmarking as a whole, which is again of acquiring data. Now, a lot of data is sensitive, it is confidential. There are certain laws and regulations which are linked in order for obtaining some sort of data. So this is where it creates some sort of a problem, especially when you are doing external benchmarking and you need to look at your competitor's performance, because most of the cases your competitor might not be that interested in divulging their business secrets. Now, moving on, we have another thing called performance benchmarking. As the name suggests, the process benchmarking specifies on a certain portion of the business. So it is just looking at a certain processes of the business. Again, one of the main aims of this sort of benchmarking is to improve the production process and would help you to identify how your company is being compared to its peers. Again, it would help us to identify what are the current processes and help us to identify how they can be better and what are the future potential changes that can make the whole processes much more better. Again, this kind of benchmarking, again, process benchmarking can be also internal or external in nature. Then we have a strategic benchmarking. As the name suggests, strategic benchmarking is evaluated more in terms of management of the organization. So it looks at long-term goals of a business. Now, the strategic benchmarking generally looks at things like hiring processes, training processes, the financial accounts of a business, their governance, leadership, the research and development for innovation, as well as the organizational structure of the business. So in terms, strategic benchmarking is much more related um, to the goals or the framework of the business rather than any sort of other key indicators. Lastly, we have performance benchmarking. Now, this time of benchmarking evaluates businesses' performance and looks at their output especially. Now, this type of benchmarking usually involves gathering and comparing of quantitative data, which could be either financial in nature, such as your costs and your income, um, or this could be like non-financial in nature, where you have the number of employees or the number of customers. And again, with any sort of benchmarking, the performance benchmarking can either be internal or external in nature. Now, moving on, we also need to understand of how we actually do the benchmarking. Now, starting off with the first phase in the benchmarking is of planning. Now, this planning basically have a certain steps to it. So first of all, you need to determine what are the goals and objectives of benchmarking. It's why are you performing benchmarking? Are you doing benchmarking just to increase your profitability? Are you doing benchmarking because you want to increase your profit share? So you need to first identify why you are benchmarking. Then you need to identify what you are benchmarking, which leads to the collection of your internal data. So in the planning stage, it is all about your own company. It is all about determining what you want out of benchmarking. So let's say that let's take an example of a residential household, and a residential household want to compare their water and energy usage with another house. So first of all, that is their goal of benchmarking, is that they want to reduce their energy costs, they want to reduce their energy emissions. So what these residences can do is that they can collect the internal data. Now, first of all, now that internal data could be in terms of gathering how much of kilowatt hours of electricity or gas you use in a day. It could be you collecting your cost of your electricity bills. If you are benchmarking, let's say your water use, you would be collecting the data of how much water you use in your whole day. So you would be looking at your water usage in your kitchens, how much you use the water for cooking, for washing dishes. Then again, you have water use in your washroom, which is again how much you use for like brushing your teeth, how much you use the water in the loo. Then how much water are you using in your shower? Are you using a shower or are you using a bath? Because again, the water consumption is going to be much different between showers and between a bath. Um, all these things would be very important in determining um, what exactly you want to benchmark. Then moving on to the second phase of this benchmarking cycle, we move where we talk about data collection. Now, this data collection refers to the data collections of external or of your competitors. So in this case, your competitors would be other residences. Now, again, gathering their other residences data, you need to basically search more online, but there are a lot of literature available which tells you, which basically tells you how much water you should be using. So again, that would be basically your external data collection. Otherwise, you can do some sort of a small survey where you can ask your friends and family on their own water use, their own energy bills, and that way you would be able to determine what are the differences. Then the third phase of benchmarking would be the data analysis, where you actually compare the data that you have obtained from your competitors and the data that you have obtained or calculated yourself. And you compare that data and to see basically how that business or how that household is basically how household is basically performing. And if those households are performing better than you, then you can see what are the reasons of their performance, what is the reason of them having a better performance. Is it because they have some sort of low carbon technology which reduces their energy costs or emissions? um, do they have fewer people in their homes? Are their homes better insulated? All these things then are included in your data analysis. Then moving on to the last phase of your benchmarking cycle, which is the adaptation. So basically this adaptation covers in how you are going to do what your competitors or what the other people are doing, and how you are going to copy their best practices into your own bubble, so that you can improve whatever you want to improve. And basically that would be your adaptation. So basically, with the benchmarking is all about improving your performance while basically analyzing what your competitors are doing in order for you to identify what the best practices are in a certain industry. That is basically a general introduction to benchmarking. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask me now. Otherwise, we do have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar as well.
All right. You can unmute yourself if you have any questions or comments. Otherwise, we'll move on with Nathan and take questions at the end in the discussion and Q&A session. All right, Nathan, do you want to?
Yeah, sure.
Start?
So as Aisha mentioned, my name's Nathan, and I'm finishing off my PhD here at Bangor University. And basically, I've spent years of my life now looking at performance analysis and benchmarking of water and energy in all kinds of different ways. And I thought, well, what better way to talk about that stuff than condense it down to 20 minutes here today. So yeah, I'm going to go into case studies, mainly two different ones. We didn't know who was going to sign up to the webinar, so we're trying to cover a good variation, basically. So the first one is going to be on hotels, which is from a collection of studies from a colleague of ours. And then we're going to go on to a case study about water companies, which is directly from my publications and my research. But yeah, just a heads up on what's coming up here, because there was so much information and I wanted you to get the most information and outputs from the webinar in the least amount of time, which by the way is quite efficient, which is a theme coming up here. This is actually pre-recorded, the upcoming ones, which I did a couple of days ago. So yeah, please forgive the formal voice, which is about to come up on the opening slides, but I will be here for questions, of course. I'm not just going to run away, and that's that. See how benchmarking can be useful. We're going to take a look at hotels as a case study. So just a little mention on the infographic on the right hand side here. These are basically all the things that go into a guest's footprint in terms of water. So this middle part here, the accommodation consumption, is on litres per guest per night. So that's going to be referred to throughout the upcoming slides. So just a little reminder of what to look out for. And the things that go into this are things like irrigation, pool, laundry efficiency, dishwashing, flushing, you know, all that kind of stuff that goes on when you visit a hotel. So we're just going to start here by looking at, well, why we're looking at hotels. And that's because tourism uses over 9,000 million cubic meters of fresh water, which equates to just under 3.5% of domestic water use and about 0.3% of total water use globally. As I'm sure you'd agree, that is an incredible amount. And some more stats here. So the average tourist within Europe uses about 300 litres per day against, well, about 150 litres per day for an average European resident. And then I've just got a couple of reasons down here which have been noted online. So that seems to be for hygienic maintenance operations in accommodation, leisure activities, and a quote, pleasure mode to food, like more elaborate food preparation, showers and baths, and all that kind of thing. So as you might expect with hotels, it appears that as the level of service increases, so does the water use. So from the literature, we can see that there's actually a range from about 187 litres per occupied room per night in one-star hotels up to 1,568 litres per occupied room per night in a 5-star hotel. Now, they aren't kind of the average expected figures, that is the range. But as we look at the figure here on the right-hand side, we can see that generally that is the trend. The higher levels of service in terms of star rating, the more water consumption that we do get. And then there's just a little note on the data here, a little bit more of it. So about 10 to 20% of energy consumption in hotels is actually for water heating. So all of this kind of stuff is related in the water energy nexus. So as we reduce our water consumption, we're reducing heat as well, which basically reduces our costs, which is fantastic. Now let's see how we can actually get there. So we know that hotels use a lot of water and we know we want to reduce it, but what areas shall we target? Well, ensuite bathrooms account for approximately 30 to 40% of hotel water use. Laundering can consume approximately 100 litres per occupied room per night and account for between 12 and 47% of hotel water use. And then there's inefficient fittings, which can lead to all sorts of inefficiencies, and even a leaking toilet can lose up to 750 litres per day. Now, obviously, these are huge, huge figures, and as we keep going through them, we're just going to see more and more. So leaking taps alone can increase hotel water use by 5% on average, and there's an estimation that leaking fittings resulted in water losses of nearly 14,000 litres per day for a 117-room hotel. So these are a few areas that we can target, because these are big, big losses. Okay, so what systems can we implement to reduce these water consumption figures that you saw on the previous slide, i.e. what best practices are there out there? Well, there are two main ones. Well, this is for hotels, but you can apply this to many different areas. And the first one is sub-metering water use across accommodation zones, kitchens, laundry areas, public toilets, pools, all that kind of thing. I'm sure you get the picture. And then the second one is periodic inspection of water using equipment, fittings and leak points. And then I've highlighted a few things here which are basically heavy water using products and assets that you do have. And actually, by doing this, you can reduce a hell of a lot. As Scandic Hotels document, they say about a 25% water use reduction occurred by widespread benchmarking, and they've been doing this since 1996. And basically, companies can see it as such a big asset, benchmarking that is, that Accor hotels have a dedicated team of engineers that specifically go out and basically benchmark their hotels by using different key performance indicators. So you can see why companies do this with that 25% reduction. And the best practices sound very simple, and that's because on the face of it, they basically are. So we know we should be checking all of the different water appliances and pathways, but what level of efficiency can we get the fixtures performing at? Well, that's exactly what this figure is about here. As you can see, there's sort of non-optimized performance figures and then optimized, so where we want to actually aim for. So things like showers, like the solutions here aren't like groundbreaking, but by doing the simple stuff, effectively, we can have massive reductions, right? So showers, 100 guests, 6 minutes of showering, 15 litres a minute. If we can get that down, basically the flow rate using low flow fixtures, and get that down to 7 litres per minute, but showering for the same amount of time, same amount of guests, we can actually look at saving about 1,800 cubic meters, which equates to just under 68,000 kilowatt hours. But the big one, the big difference, is about 10,000 euros, and that's for about a 100-room hotel. And again, the stuff underneath, it's the simple stuff, but doing it effectively and consistently, essentially. And there's a study here that calculated annual water and energy savings of over 12,000 euros after retrofitting flow reducers to water fittings in a 113-room hotel. So that's not anything, again, dramatic. That's not big capital expenditure necessarily. That's retrofitting existing fittings, which is just fantastic. And that's about a 50-fold return on investment over a 12-year operating lifetime. And then just here, we've got some extra fixture benchmarks, how much they cost, and likely payback times, just in case you've got a similar water fittings and fixtures in maybe your company or property, and you might look to implement some of this. I won't go through them all here, but again, you will have the slides afterwards if you'd like to go through them. And there are some very generous payback times here, some of them as low as 2 months. So with all this in mind, how much should hotels be consuming then? Well, it very much depends on their size and what kind of services they offer, but we can offer some generalized figures so you can kind of estimate whether you're performing under or over, And this is thanks to a nice figure from an academic study. And it's split up between temperate hotels and Mediterranean, and then all kinds of different sizes. And as you can see, basically, the more services you offer again and the larger sizes, the more consumption we get. So for a bed and breakfast, quite a small establishment, it's just under 150 litres per guest per night. And then it's just over 200 for small serviced hotels, and then we keep going up and up, basically. But there are some figures out there that you can evaluate your best practice on, evaluate your benchmarking position on, based on this figure from another study, which is about 224 litres per guest per night. And that's essentially what they say best practices. And so again, that's not the average, that's best practice. So if you're below that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then this study also goes on to say, if best practice was widespread, savings potential would be about 30 to 50% across the European accommodation sector. So we're on to the final slide for the hotel case study. And basically, I wanted to emphasize the power of simple practices. So this figure here basically shows the potential water consumption reductions that you can get in a hotel in all these different areas that you see on the right hand side. So public bathrooms, kitchens, toilets, and things like that. And as you can see, it's absolutely huge. And the achievable water saving for a 100-room hotel amounts to about 15,500 cubic meters a year through implementation of best practice. And this goes up even more with the use of grey or rainwater for toilet flushing. And when you model that for the water heating energy savings, that's over 200,000 kilowatt hours per year. And in brass tacks, in euros, that's just under 60,000. So this is absolutely significant. And the best part is, like I say, a lot of the time it's simple practices like retrofitting and things like that. But sometimes if you're not in the process of continuously essentially monitoring your performance, sometimes you don't know there's an issue, right? If you're not monitoring, say, leakage and things like that, these things can creep up on you. But the good thing is, a lot of time they're easy to fix, and the payoffs are well, they're very quick. So that's fantastic. I'm now going to briefly discuss some of my research looking at the efficiency performance of water companies and basically try and look at the lessons learned from those benchmarking exercises. So I'm going to go over why benchmarking water companies is important, basically, and why improving their consumption of water and energy is a good thing. So the UK water industry produced 2.9 megatons of carbon dioxide in 2020, which is just under 1% of national carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, which doesn't sound like much, but let me tell you, that's massively improved by the water sector in recent years, so well done to them. But at the same time, we still want to get that down even more. If that's to hit their targets, great, but generally just to emit less emissions, right? And approximately 2% of total energy use within the US is a result of supply and treating water. And that can be up to 30 to 40% of the energy use of individual municipalities. And then the UN state 8% of global primary energy supply is used to deliver and treat water. So we know basically it's a big issue. What can we do about it? Well, we benchmarked and we looked at the efficiency and we found a few key lessons. The first one being the importance of indicator choice. So on the right hand side here, all the different variations of indicators we used to model the performance of a bunch of water companies, basically. And you don't have to look into the details too much, but basically the figures on the right hand side are basically, were these companies improving in their efficiency over time or declining? And that's the percentage associated with it. And the kinds of things we were looking at were based around all aspects of sustainability, which is kind of rare in some of these analyses. But yeah, we tried to include renewable energy generation, customer satisfaction, along with the usual stuff like how much they actually spend and the amount of water they supply and treat. So we evaluated performance over a 6-year period. Like I say, there's 8 model configurations with environmental and social indicators, and we had a range dipping from -3% to plus about 5%. And and then these are all basically the ranks of the 12 different companies we looked at, which looks a bit daunting here, but let me highlight a few things so we can see that it can significantly affect results when we look at the rankings of these companies. So companies that were first and second in some model configurations, all of a sudden were right down the bottom of the list, and vice versa for company 12 there. And basically, what's really weird about this is that all of these combinations of indicators, by the way, each one of them, if I took them completely apart and showed them to someone in the sector or tried to publish them in academia in a journal, they would have basically gone down okay. So it really shows the importance of indicator choice, as they can have massively different results. Another good lesson that I came across whilst doing these benchmarking studies were basically, if you don't have the data, then let's use proxy indicators. And these are basically indicators that try and represent another indicator of which you don't have the information for. So I'll show an example to make that a little bit clearer. So, for example, I was looking at water companies, right? And I used population served with water supply to replace the volume of water produced, and that was in an energy efficiency analysis. And what did we find? We found it actually looked, well, very good. All the companies remained the same in terms of ranking, and they're about the same efficiency score when the proxy was used. And that was kind of to be expected for this proxy. And as you can see with the figure, all the points on the graph are all overlapping, which is exactly what you want to see with this. And then the only real impact was that companies looked, on average, 1% less efficiency when the proxy variable was used, i.e. When we used population served for the water supply as opposed to the pure volume data. I also tested another proxy indicator that's commonly used by water companies and studies and things like that, and that was replacing capital expenditure with kilometers of water mains, i.e. the piping network that they use, and that was in an economic efficiency analysis. And basically we found this wasn't a great replacement at all. 10 companies changed their ranks, and if you look at the graph here on the right, you can see the divergence between those points. Like you saw in the last one, they're overlapping, and maybe for the first 7, 8, 9 companies here, they are overlapping, but then you get this huge divergences, and that's exactly what you don't want. And it actually implied companies were on average about 12.5% more efficient. So we just looked at proxy indicators there and how they can be very useful when benchmarking and analysing performance, as long as you choose the right ones. So along with that, I wanted to just emphasise the importance of understanding explanatory factors. So sometimes performance isn't solely the result of actions taken by a business. There can be many external factors. Some are more obvious than others, sure, and there's some you can control for the better, and some out of your control altogether. For example, if you're an ice cream salesperson and it's a sunny day, you can bet your sales will be up. That's an exogenous factor, which is kind of a fancy word, but basically a simple concept. Now, of course, with many businesses or processes, there's external factors that can be a little more complicated. But if we put kind of effort into understanding them, there's potential to maximize the efficiency of the company. And that's kind of what this slide is about here. So we'll take another look at some of the work I've done at another section of what I've done. So we found that leakage had a significant negative influence on energy and economic efficiency. I'm sure that's no surprise to any of you. But sometimes once you can confirm something statistically at certain companies and certain locations, you can see that it's well worth going after and spending large amounts of money on. Now, again, I'm sure it's no surprise to you, but it's good to have that confirmed and sometimes just back up the methods and data you're using. Along with that, we saw that average pumping head height had significant negative effect on energy efficiency. If there's any engineers in here, I'm sure that's no surprise to you. But along with that, we also saw number of abstraction sources had significant negative effects on economic and energy efficiency. Now, this one I find, particularly interesting because diversifying your sources would make the service more reliable, right? Just basically anything that diversifies things you require is normally a good thing. But the cost of that is poorer efficiency. So sometimes you have to accept negative impacts on efficiency to improve basically your service and things like that. And then if we go into the last point here, and then we also found that per capita consumption and surface water abstraction percentage had significant positive influences on economic and energy efficiency. So this was again kind of expected to an extent. If your customers are all in one area, you don't really have to use as much piping to go out to them. You don't have to send people as far afield when they have to go out and visit their properties and things like that. And it's just generally cheaper not to pump water from, deep down in the earth. But by understanding some of these factors, and especially by doing it in certain regions, you can then kind of target where to improve next to improve your efficiency.
Okay, so it looks like the audio is cut out there for some unknown reason. But we were pretty much at the end. I was just talking about how benchmarking can assist you in targeting your decision making, basically, and can help inform places to invest in to improve that efficiency. That's essentially what I was about to finish on before I pass back over to Aisha to discuss what basically all of this means for you in terms of Anum's stuff on summarizing benchmarking and how you do it and things like that, along with my case studies as well. So Aisha, if you can take it away.
Thank you, Nathan. I work mainly on auditing, rating, and benchmarking of water-related energy use of different demands. So kind of a complement to Nathan's work. And this is helping me develop policy and best practice guidelines for different water stakeholders. So I'm looking into households, I'm looking into offices, leisure centers and schools. They are fairly representative of the types of demands that you would find in the Interreg Ireland Wales region. So the question is, I suppose, why I'm looking into demand. And the water industry is very energy intensive, and about 3% of the world's total energy use is used to produce and supply water, to process and dispose of wastewater. In the UK, for example, the water sector is one of the most energy intensive sectors and accounts for about 4% of total electricity use and about 1% of emissions. So this is all going to be complicated or compounded by projected changes in population and demographics, and also in projected reduction in availability of freshwater resources. So the industry itself has been working to reduce its energy use, and it considers itself as a pathway to the energy transition necessary for reducing emissions and achieving net zero carbon. However, the sector can only really do so much once water gets delivered to customers. So a lot of the figures that we have for water use in the water industry is actually for the production and the delivery of water. Most of the energy associated with water use is related to demand of water, on the demand side of water use, and giving, the linkage between hot water use and energy use and therefore emissions. There's considerable scope to look into this, to understand it, to benchmark it, so that we can come up with intervention measures, really, and contribute to emissions reductions from the demand side. So water supply and wastewater operations on their own are quite poor indicators of actually water-related energy use. And so pretty much, yes, that's why I'm looking at demand. And reducing water use, as Nishan mentioned, and Anam, I think, not only reduces, costs and emissions for businesses in particular, it reduces the amount of wastewater they produce. And this will in turn reduce, both water and sewerage or effluent charges, trade charges for companies. It increases headroom for water suppliers, which is the gap between supply capacity and demand, and reduces the need for water companies. Therefore, the more headroom they have, the less they would need to have to develop costly new water sources or expand infrastructure, at increased cost that will all have to be passed down to water users. So, understanding how we use water and benchmarking it to compare against industry best practices or against policy guidelines can help us, can help ensure that existing resources and infrastructure are sufficient, even during extreme events, prolonged dry weather events, and so on and so forth. So increasingly ambitious climate targets are, like the climate and ecological emergency declarations that we've been seeing since 2018, 2019, Paris Agreement targets, Sustainable Development Goals, the upcoming COP26 in November are, going to increasingly play a role in policy direction and the speed at which we would all need to change across the board in the sector to make to contribute to these net zero targets. So benchmarking is a way we think that can allow for a lot of these things to happen. You don't know what you're using or how you're using unless you measure and you monitor and you benchmark and you benchmark your water and your energy use. So that's really it for me on this. And we'll now move on to the discussion and Q&A section of this session. If anyone has any questions, can you please post them in the chat section or unmute yourself and on your video if you would like to ask any questions or make any comments. Okay, we have something from Emil. I hope I said that right. It's for you, Nathan. It's a question. Did you come across limescale deposit impacts on energy and water use in the hotel industry?
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just reading the rest of the question as well. There's a little bit of extra detail there. I did not, but I mean, yeah, that is without a doubt one of the kind of those explanatory factors that I was talking about on one of the other slides. That's definitely one of those that should be assessed. Now, my specific research was on the water company side. The hotels was from a colleague of ours, but from the extra kind of research I did around that, I didn't actually see much of those limescale deposits being integrated into any kind of benchmarking analysis at all, actually. But I mean, if it does significantly impact performance, then I mean, that would be great to implement that. I mean, I mean, you've got a stat in here around 1 centimeter of scale deposits increase energy consumption by 50%. Should that be decrease, or am I reading that wrong with the 1 centimeter of scale deposits? But yeah, without a doubt, anything that impacts the performance of a process like that should without a doubt be involved, especially towards the more narrower scope of analysis. Obviously, if you just look at the very high level things of energy consumption and water consumption per hotel user or whatever, then some things like that will be lost, absolutely. But if you actually are running a hotel, then that is something that you absolutely need to look at.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nathan. Just to clarify, I mean, as you know, hotels are using lots of heated water. So, with the heats of 60, 70 degrees Celsius, like limescale getting very aggressive. So it covers heating elements in a boilers, heat exchangers. And then when they're covered with the limescale, it demands more energy. So it's kind of hard, so and then at the end it results in corrosion, so it kind of breaks down, so you have leaks and everything.
Yeah, that would be one interesting to analyze. That's actually very interesting that you've brought that up, and I'm glad you have. And on the other side, it sounds like one of those kind of not necessarily easy fixes, but potentially like a long-term cheap fix, right? If it's going to reduce the efficiency that much, that would be something that'd be great to be rolled out, to many hotels and industries for that matter.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, thanks.
I think this is something that can be improved through constant monitoring and constant maintenance and everything. With that, hopefully, the hotels would not have that much of a problem with the limescale.
I think it's actually something that would be a lot more easier to benchmark across hotels than, say, benchmark per person or per bed per night per year, because these are proxies, right? Hotels don't really have the specific data that would allow them to benchmark how guests use water. It's all through a proxy on the demand side. So this sounds like it would actually make more sense to focus on these type of things that would be easier to benchmark, I suppose. We have another comment from Brendan, sorry. Through benchmarking in the hotel and other sectors, is there a preferred data collection method or form that you recommend? Is there consistency in data collection method through your evidence collection? Or is this an area to develop to help all business in resource efficiency?
I mean, that's a great question. I almost, for hotels specifically, I don't think there is a common approach necessarily. In terms of other sectors, I'm not so sure. Perhaps Aisha or Anam would be best served to do that, because they've looked at more on the demand side, whereas I've looked more at the supply side. I don't know what you guys think.
Yes. Well, I think, demand, it's always site specific, isn't it? And especially with hotels, we're not there yet in having a specific method across the board where you can measure how much each guest use in terms of energy and water use. So we use proxies like beds per night per year that a hotel operates. And there's also the proxy that that is used that is, oh gosh, that is STAR, the rating, the hotel rating. You know, there is research that indicates a strong correlation between resource use and efficiency and the ratings of hotels and stuff like that. But I'm not actually aware of anything that goes beyond that. May exist out there, but I'm not actively working in this area, so I haven't looked. But I know that hotels do use proxies, and the STAR rating of the hotel also is gives an indication of how much is used.
Yeah.
Does anyone have anything actually to add to this? There may be people that know more.
I just want to add that before you want to do a benchmarking, again, you need to determine why you are conducting that benchmarking, and that why and the goals and aims of the benchmarking would help you identify what kind of data you actually need. It's like, for example, in hotels, are you looking at processes, or are you looking at the overall performance of a hotel? And that would help you identify certain indicators for data collection.
And also what type of hotel it is. You know, does it have a restaurant? Does it have swimming pool and spa and stuff like that? So I think it's really quite difficult without knowing a lot of these factors to say, oh, this is what hotels should use. This is the benchmark for a hotel, even per guest, without taking all these other factors into account. Sorry, Nathan, you were going to say?
No, yeah, I was just going to add on to what Anam was saying there, really. I guess whether it's a hotel or any other business or company, or even your house for that matter, there's kind of two ways you do it, right? And that's the larger scope, the overall one, where you figure out, well, what is it that we sell, or what is our service, and what things go into that? So how many, you know, hours of working, or how much money, how much energy, how much water go into that, and then that forms just a normalized indicator to, like, for your base to be let's say your base foundation to compare things to. And then from, I mean, bills alone, you can sort of identify where large consumption is happening, and then you can start that process benchmarking and looking at specific assets, for example. Yeah.
And there's a comment from Camilla's. I think it's for Emir. There are a number of water softeners on the market, including magnetic ones, which require very little maintenance and which work very well. Thanks, Camilla's. Are there any comments or questions for Anam or Nathan? No? All right, this is where we'll stop. And thank you all very much for joining us today. Oh, sorry, is there someone else talking? Okay, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to share another very quick poll, please, on feedback on this session. And I'm also going to share a feedback form in the chat section. This will really help us in organizing and future events, which we would all like to have you attend, if you can, please. Diolch I bawb am ymunw heddiw ar drafodeth. Gobeithio gweld bawb in person, in personal, in one. Thank you all very much. And you can follow progress on our website, on Twitter, or registering for our newsletter. And if you would like to join our research cluster, please get in touch. All recordings of this webinar and all the others we've had so far this year are available there. And yes, thank you all very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you for attending.